The first carriage rolled through the stone gates of Ashcombe Manor just as dawn broke over the English countryside. A pale mist clung to the fields, and the old oak trees cast long shadows across the gravel drive. Lord Adrian Ashcombe, 36 years old and Earl of Ashcombe, looked through the carriage window with the detached eyes of a man returning to a place that no longer belonged to his heart. For nearly 11 months he had been away in London and across Europe, untangling endless legal disputes left behind after his father's death. Every letter from the estate had spoken only of expenses, repairs, taxes, and tenants. Home had become another responsibility, a burden waiting patiently for his return. He expected silence. He expected dust. He expected servants who worked only because they were paid. Instead, laughter drifted through the open windows before the carriage had even stopped. Adrian frowned. Someone was singing. Children's voices echoed across the gardens, followed by the bark of a dog chasing them through rows of blooming roses. The fountains were flowing. Flower beds that had once been neglected burst with color. Even the ancient ivy climbing the manor walls seemed healthier than he remembered. The coachman opened the carriage door. "Welcome home, your lordship." Adrian stepped onto the gravel, removing his gloves slowly as he surveyed the estate. "It appears," he murmured, "someone has mistaken my house for a family home." The elderly housekeeper, Mrs. Bellamy, hurried down the front steps. She had served 3 generations of Ashcombes and had once feared no one, not even Adrian's stern father. She curtsied politely. "Welcome home, my lord." Adrian handed her his hat. "The gardens." "Yes, my lord." "The fountain." "Repaired in March." "The south greenhouse." "Growing vegetables again." Adrian narrowed his eyes. "I did not authorize any of this." "No, my lord." "And yet it has been done." "Yes, my lord." He stared at her. She merely smiled. The smell reached him next. Fresh bread. Cinnamon. Roasted herbs. For as long as Adrian could remember, Ashcombe Manor had smelled of cold stone and old books. His father believed warmth was an unnecessary expense, and comfort encouraged laziness. Fires remained unlit unless winter demanded them. Meals were practical rather than enjoyable. Now the entrance hall carried the scent of home. It unsettled him. As he stepped inside, another surprise awaited. Sunlight streamed through polished windows that had once been stained with years of neglect. Fresh flowers rested in simple ceramic vases along the staircase. Children's drawings hung neatly in wooden frames beside portraits of long-dead ancestors. Adrian stopped. "What are these?" Mrs. Bellamy looked where he was pointing. "The children's artwork, my lord. They've been nailed to the walls. They insisted. And no one stopped them." She smiled again. "Someone said houses are happier when children leave their mark." "Someone. Always someone." "Who?" Mrs. Bellamy adjusted her apron. "Miss Eleanor Hart." The name meant nothing to him. He searched his memory. "Nothing. Who is Miss Hart?" "The governess." "I hired no governess." "No, my lord." Silence followed. Finally she added gently. "Your solicitor did. Last winter. When your niece refused to speak to anyone after Lady Margaret passed away." Adrian remembered signing papers without reading every page. There had been too many documents. Too many responsibilities. "I see." But he didn't. "Not really." "Where are the children?" "In the old music room." Music room? It became the schoolroom. Another surprise. Everything had changed. As they climbed the staircase, Adrian noticed ribbons tied around the banisters in different colors. Blue. Green. Yellow. "What are these for?" Mrs. Bellamy chuckled softly. "The younger staff hide them every Monday." Whoever finds them all before supper wins ginger biscuits. Adrian blinked. Servants have time for games. They work harder because they laugh, my lord. He said nothing. His father would have dismissed the entire household before sunset. When they reached the second floor, Adrian heard a woman's voice. And if King Alfred had listened to everyone telling him something was impossible, England would have had a very different story. Children laughed. Not polite laughter. Real laughter. His nephew. His niece. Adrian had not heard either sound in years. The schoolroom door stood slightly open. He stopped before entering. Inside, sunlight poured across the wooden floor. His 11-year-old niece sat cross-legged beside an 8-year-old boy whose cheeks glowed with health. Books lay scattered everywhere. In the center of them sat a young woman of about 28. She wasn't dressed like a fashionable lady. Her sleeves were rolled neatly above her wrists. A loose strand of chestnut hair had escaped her braid. There was a faint smudge of charcoal on her cheek. She sat on the floor instead of the chair. One child leaned against her shoulder. The other held open a history book. She looked perfectly at home. Now, she said dramatically, if you had been the general, what would you have done? I'd attack. No, laughed the little girl. I'd make peace first. And why? Because fewer people would die. The governess smiled. That is exactly why history should. The following morning, Lord Adrian Ashcombe shut himself inside the estate library. For nearly 12 months he had trusted others to manage Ashcombe Manor while he settled legal affairs abroad. Now, determined to understand the estate he barely recognized, he ordered every ledger, receipt, tenancy record, and account book from the previous 5 years to be brought before him. The oak table disappeared beneath towers of leather-bound ledgers. Sunlight faded into afternoon. The fire burned low. Still Adrian read. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Payments for timber. Repairs to cottages. Grain purchases. Coal deliveries. Everything appeared ordinary, until the handwriting changed. For years the accounts had been written in the precise script of Mr. Grayson, the former estate steward. Then, halfway through the newest ledger, another handwriting appeared. Straight. Clear. Elegant without decoration. Beside one payment was a short note. Receipt does not match the quantity delivered. Another page carried another remark. Counted personally. 20 sacks missing. Then another. Tenant states rent already collected. Adrian sat upright. The notes continued page after page. Small observations. Careful calculations. Questions no one else had bothered to ask. By sunset the truth became impossible to deny. Someone had uncovered years of theft. Thousands of pounds had quietly disappeared through false invoices, inflated prices, and missing harvests. The person who uncovered everything was not the steward. It was Miss Eleanor Hart. Adrian rang the bell. Mrs. Bellamy entered almost immediately. You wish to see me, my lord? He tapped the open ledger. These notes. Yes, my lord. Miss Hart wrote them. She did. How long did it take her? Mrs. Bellamy thought for a moment. Most evenings after the children were asleep. Every evening. For nearly 3 months. Adrian stared silently at the pages. Why? Because something felt wrong. He looked up. She wasn't employed to examine my accounts. No. Then why involve herself? Mrs. Bellamy smiled gently. Because she said if the house was leaking, it hardly mattered whose duty it was to mend the roof. Adrian lowered his eyes again. The words stayed with him. The deeper he searched, the heavier his conscience became. Mr. Grayson had not merely stolen money. He had ordered poor-quality coal for the servants. He had charged the estate 4 times its value. He delayed repairs while claiming they had been completed. Tenant families had gone without assistance during the harshest winter in years because the relief funds had disappeared into his own pockets. Every fraud had eventually been uncovered. Every false receipt corrected. Every dishonest payment cancelled. All by one woman. A governess. Not an accountant. Not an estate manager. Simply someone who refused to ignore what was wrong. That evening Adrian walked through the servants' corridor for the first time since inheriting the title. Conversation stopped the moment he entered. Every servant stood. He raised a hand. "Please, continue." Nobody moved. He looked toward the cook, Mrs. Hughes. "I've been reading the accounts." She exchanged nervous glances with the others. "I understand the coal supplied last winter was unfit for use." Mrs. Hughes hesitated. "It was, my lord." "Why was I never informed?" Silence. Finally the elderly cook answered. "You were never here." The word struck harder than any accusation. "We complained to Mr. Grayson. And he said warmth was expensive." Adrian remembered hearing almost those exact words from his father. His stomach tightened. Mrs. Hughes continued carefully. "Miss Hart came into the kitchen one freezing morning." "What happened?" "I showed her the coal. And she picked up one lump, looked at it, and asked if this was truly what we were expected to cook with." The cook smiled faintly. "When I told her yes, she refused to eat dinner until proper coal was delivered." "For how long?" 3 days. 3 days. She lived on bread and tea. And then? Mr. Grayson dismissed the supplier and ordered better coal. Adrian frowned. He obeyed her. Mrs. Hughes laughed softly. "No, my lord." He feared she'd expose him. That night Adrian could not sleep. He wandered through the quiet manor until a light beneath the nursery door caught his attention. The room was empty now. The children slept elsewhere. Curious, he stepped inside. Everything was neat. Books arranged carefully. Blankets folded. A small wooden horse rested beside the fireplace. Near the bed stood an old woven rug. One side of it was flattened. As though someone had spent many nights lying there. Mrs. Bellamy's footsteps sounded behind him. "You found it." Adrian looked at her. "Found what?" "The place where Miss Hart slept." He frowned. "There are guest rooms." "She wouldn't use them." "Why?" "When Master Oliver became ill in February." His heartbeat slowed. "Ill?" "The fever lasted 8 days." Adrian's face drained of color. "No one told me." "We wrote." "More than once." Mrs. Bellamy nodded sadly. 3 letters. He remembered unopened envelopes waiting inside a traveling case still stored in London. He had never read them. She refused to leave his bedside, Mrs. Bellamy continued. She slept here. On the floor. For 8 nights. Adrian stared at the worn rug. And the doctor? Mrs. Bellamy hesitated. The physician demanded payment before returning. Adrian looked up sharply. The estate had no money available. What happened? Miss Hart sold the only valuable thing she owned. What was it? Her late mother's sapphire brooch. Silence filled the nursery. Adrian could almost picture it. A frightened little boy burning with fever. A young woman refusing to leave him alone. Sleeping on the floor. Selling the last memory of her mother simply to save someone else's child. His chest tightened painfully. The next morning he found Eleanor in the orchard helping his niece prune young apple trees. Sunlight filtered through the branches as the children laughed over whose basket would fill first. Adrian approached quietly. Miss Hart. She looked up. Good morning, my lord. I've reviewed the estate accounts. I imagined you might. I also learned about Mr. Grayson. She nodded once. It needed to be dealt with. You recovered thousands of pounds. The estate recovered them. You exposed years of corruption. It belonged to your family. He looked directly into her eyes. You sold your mother's brooch. For the first time since meeting her, she seemed uncomfortable. It was only a brooch. It was your inheritance. It became a doctor's fee. You should have sent for me. We did. The simple answer cut deeper than anger ever could. Adrian struggled to find words. I intend to repay everything. She smiled politely. No, my lord. It belongs to you. It belonged to my mother. I'll buy it back. She gently shook her head. Some things cannot be bought back. Before he could answer, Oliver came running across the grass. Miss Hart. Come quickly. Emily says there's a bird trapped in the greenhouse. Without another word, Eleanor hurried after the children. Adrian remained beneath the apple tree, watching them disappear into the morning sunlight. For the first time in many years, he understood something no account book could ever measure. An estate was not saved by wealth. It was saved by the people willing to sacrifice everything for it, without ever expecting anything in return. For the first time since inheriting the title, Lord Adrian Ashcombe stopped behaving like a visitor in his own home. The changes began quietly. Every morning before breakfast, he walked through the estate instead of locking himself inside the library. He visited the tenant cottages, inspected broken fences, and spoke with stable boys whose names he had never bothered to learn. He listened more than he spoke. The servants watched from a distance. None of them trusted the change. Not yet. One rainy afternoon, Adrian entered the kitchen carrying a heavy sack of flour over his shoulder. Mrs. Hughes nearly dropped the bowl she was holding. My lord. I was passing the mill. The footmen would have carried that. I know. You are the Earl. I am also the man who has ignored this house for far too long. Without another word, he placed the sack beside the pantry door. No speeches. No pride. Just work. The kitchen staff exchanged silent glances. Perhaps, they thought, he truly was changing. But one person remained unconvinced. Miss Eleanor Hart. She accepted his kindness with the same calm politeness she showed everyone else. When he thanked her for teaching the children, she simply nodded. When he praised her careful management of the estate, she changed the subject. When he apologized for his absence, she answered only. The children are well now, my lord. She never blamed him. That somehow hurt even more. Several weeks later, trouble arrived at Ashcombe Manor. A richly dressed carriage rolled into the courtyard carrying Sir Reginald Pembroke, Lady Margaret's older brother, accompanied by 2 solicitors. He entered the drawing room with a confident smile. My dear Adrian. Adrian offered a brief nod. Sir Reginald. I've come regarding Emily and Oliver. The children looked up nervously. Sir Reginald folded his gloves. I believe it would be best if they came to live with me. No. The answer came instantly. Sir Reginald blinked. You haven't even heard my reasons. I don't need to. I can provide a proper education. They already have one. I can offer them society. They have a family. The older man laughed coldly. You've spent a year abroad. I know. You left these children behind. I did. You have no wife. I know that as well. Sir Reginald leaned closer. Then what exactly qualifies you to raise them? Before Adrian could answer, Eleanor quietly stood. I believe, she said calmly, the children should answer that question. Everyone turned. Emily stepped forward first. Her hands trembled. I want to stay here. Oliver nodded vigorously. So do I. Sir Reginald frowned. You are children. Emily looked directly at him. And this is our home. The room fell silent. Adrian rested one reassuring hand on each child's shoulder. My answer remains the same. Sir Reginald's smile disappeared. You'll regret this. I regret enough already. The visitors left before sunset. Neither child spoke until the carriage disappeared beyond the gates. Then Oliver threw his arms around Adrian. The Earl hesitated only a heartbeat before embracing the boy tightly. Emily quietly slipped her hand into Eleanor's. For the first time in years, neither child looked afraid. That evening Adrian found Eleanor in the rose garden, trimming faded blossoms beneath the fading light. She didn't look up as he approached. The roses bloom longer if the dead flowers are removed, she said softly. I know almost nothing about roses. I've noticed. Despite herself, she smiled. It vanished almost immediately. Adrian stood beside her for several moments. Finally he spoke. I owe you an apology. You've already apologized. Not properly. She continued clipping the branches. I judged you before I knew you. Silence. I ignored every letter you sent. Still silence. I abandoned this house. She placed the shears on the stone bench. You did. I abandoned those children. Yes. I abandoned you. She finally looked at him. You didn't even know me. I should have. The evening breeze carried the scent of lavender across the garden. Adrian took a slow breath. When I first returned, I thought this house belonged to my family because my name was written on the deeds. He looked toward the glowing windows of Ashcombe Manor. I was wrong. She waited quietly. You made frightened children laugh again. You gave tired servants hope. You saved families I had never bothered to meet. You protected an estate that wasn't even yours. His voice became quieter. While I carried the title, you carried the home. Eleanor lowered her eyes. My lord. He gently interrupted. I don't wish to marry you because I owe you something. She looked up. I don't wish to marry you because my family expects it. He stepped closer. I wish to marry you because every room feels empty when you're not in it. Her hands tightened around the gardening gloves. I don't believe you. The words were barely louder than a whisper. I believe you feel grateful. I believe you feel guilty. I believe you'll regret this in a year's time. Tears gathered in her eyes. I will not become another duty on your list. Adrian's heart sank. What would convince you? She looked toward the manor. When those children no longer wonder if you'll leave again. When the servants stop whispering that this kindness might disappear. When this house trusts you. Then perhaps I'll believe you. She walked away before he could answer. The months that followed changed everything. Adrian kept every promise without mentioning them again. He repaired every tenant cottage before renovating his own rooms. He read bedtime stories to Emily and Oliver every night. Every Tuesday afternoon he sat in the schoolroom while Eleanor taught history, pretending not to notice whenever the children corrected his answers. He laughed with them. Worked beside them. Stayed. Autumn arrived. Then winter. He never left. One snowy evening, Oliver looked up from his book. Uncle Adrian? Yes. You're not going away again, are you? Adrian knelt beside him. No. Never. Never without taking all of you with me. Oliver smiled. The little boy believed him completely. Across the room, Eleanor quietly wiped away a tear. Spring returned to Ashcombe Manor exactly 1 year after Adrian had first come home. The gardens bloomed brighter than ever. The estate prospered. The servants laughed openly. Children's voices filled every corridor. Near the old oak tree, Adrian found Eleanor planting white roses. He knelt beside her. "I've waited a year." She smiled softly. "I know. I promised not to ask again until the house believed me." "It does. And you?" She reached for his hand. "I watched you become the man these children always deserved." She smiled through tears. "And somewhere along the way, you became the man I loved." Adrian laughed quietly, relief washing over him. "So. Is that a yes?" She nodded. "It always was." He slipped a simple family ring onto her finger. No grand audience. No ceremony. Just two people standing beneath the spring sunshine where hope had quietly taken root. They were married that June in the small village church. The entire estate attended. Mrs. Hughes cried openly throughout the ceremony. Emily proudly carried the wedding flowers. Oliver insisted on ringing the church bell himself and nearly frightened the pigeons from the roof. Years later, visitors often asked why Ashcombe Manor felt different from every other great house in England. The answer was never found in its gardens. Nor its grand halls. Nor its ancient title. It lived in the warmth that filled every room. For Lord Adrian Ashcombe had finally learned the lesson that changed his life forever. A house is inherited by birth. But a home is earned through love.